So what this today is for is about, we're making a presentation, a series of presentations for the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower. And there's one about the history of the Mayflower itself, one of children's activities, making Rocky Road cakes and things like that. There's one of worship material. And this one is about the legacy of the Pilgrims, good and bad. And the idea is that one of the things that drove them was the idea they were going to find a promised land. So they saw their journey as a kind of exodus to find the promised land. And of course, one of the things about the promised land is that the tribes get driven out ahead of the people of God, so that there's an exclusion as well as an inclusion.
Yes.
So we want to find out, we'll have things about the indigenous peoples, the First Nations peoples, but also my part is to say what happened since then. So one of the things that happened was the terrible experience of the slaves being transported obviously against their will, but also that there was a narrative of the Exodus and the Promised Land. They were being taken out of slavery like the Israelites from Egypt, and trying to find an escape to a promised land in escaping from the southern states to find freedom. And I wanted
Did you know that the first enslaved people actually came over before the Pilgrims, and that was in 1619, and the Pilgrims came in 1620.
So say some more about that then. They came in 1619, the first.
Yes, Jamestown, Virginia. That was when the first enslaved people came over, and then of course the Pilgrims came over in 1620. So
yeah,
the difference is, of course, we came over, and how we came in the hold of the boat,
yes,
and the Pilgrims came on the decks. So,
and that's an amazing picture to have.
Yes.
That contrast is amazing. So that we'll add that to the history part of it, the long distant history. But I was so impressed when I came to the Underground Railroad experience, and
I wanted to ask you about that. You've mentioned that several times, and I would like to know what it was that impressed you so much.
The fact that it's not just a museum, it's an experience. And
Yes.
so, because I was the only visitor at that time, to go through the experience, that is to be taken through that journey, was very immersing. And of course, I was there as a white visitor, someone who's on the side of the enslavers. So I was seeing, or not experiencing, but being taken through a history in which all my sympathy was on the side of the escaping slaves, and always has been. But who I am makes me one of the oppressors. And it was that pull that was impressive.
You know what, I discovered something. What you just alluded to, I didn't discover that until after we had started this. The people would go down, and then they would come up, and their eyes would be like, you know, something had happened to them.
Yes.
And I said, I've eventually discovered that what we had done was, this was the first time that the European Americans, the white ones, had ever had an opportunity to see themselves as more than enslavers, to see themselves as being good people in a way, and that they had a chance to deal with their guilt, the guilt that they felt. And the Black people had an opportunity to deal with their submerged rage. They had so much rage, and they had never dealt with that before, really. And it was amazing, because we made it a definite thing that when you were down there, there was no violence. This was the first time that white people were able to see themselves as being good in a way, because you had the Quakers, and you didn't have any beatings, and you didn't have any real negative things. And this was the first time that Black people were able to see white people as something other than the ones who treated them so badly, because we made it a point. I made it a point to not have any of that kind of negative stuff. They felt that anyway, but they saw themselves as being different. They were able to deal with it. And I didn't understand that until after I watched the people come up, because they came up those stairs with that free at last, free at last. And they came up and they were just, we had to start a debriefing, because we couldn't let the people leave feeling like they were feeling without dealing with that. And that was really a great experience. So that's why I was asking you, what was it about that experience? Another thing that was so great was that I think this was the first time, and it was the women usually, the European American women who could see that the children, the enslaved Black children, were sold away from their parents. And they never thought about that before. And it was something that they mentioned all the time, that I never realized that. And it was a good thing. It's 19 years old now. That experience has been going on for 19 years.
Fabulous. And it does so much good. Now, when we show this as part of our own presentation, when you say Underground Railroad, to most British people, they think of the London Underground, and they think of trains, underground trains.
It isn't just the British people. Everybody thinks that there were some trains going underground.
Well, the sake of those who are seeing this for the first time, could you just explain for our viewers, so to speak, what the Underground Railroad was?
Okay, you want me to give you a preview now, or just do it?
Just say, tell us what it was, and then this is part of the
Okay, there's a little story that goes with it, and that was that the master, if you will, people were escaping. People were being missed. The enslaved people were being missed, and he said one day that they just got away so slick. It was almost like they got on some kind of underground railroad and escaped. And that's where that term is supposed to have come from. But actually, it was just a system of trailways and routes that they used to get from one place to another place. And there were various different houses that they went to and so forth. And they called it underground, really, because it was not open and obvious so that people could see it. That's what the term really means.
So it was.
And I want to say something else to you.
Yeah.
You notice that I have been saying enslaved, enslaved, and I have taught myself to do that. We say slaves, 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 but a slave is someone who was born into a situation that it just happened to them. Enslaved is something where a person is born and then some sort of laws or whatever you might want to call it does something to them and enslaves them. People are born equal, and then someone with a set of laws, etc., changes that freedom, that free person, from being a free person to being an enslaved person. They enslave them. And if you think about it, it really makes a difference, at least it did for me, how I saw people, how I observed people, the difference between being enslaved and being a slave. I don't know if that's clear or not.
Yes, because you're a person is a person who is enslaved, whereas
Yes.
it makes it sound as though that's your entire identity.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Everyone, as you say, we're all persons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I'll try and remember to say that then. And I will not just in this conversation. I'll try and remember that for the future.
You're gonna train yourself like I've trained myself.
Yes. And the church in Detroit really was on the Underground Railroad. It's not.
Yeah. Yes, it was. The one that you went to, this one here, this is the one that you went to. This was the third meeting house. Slavery was over before this church was built. The churches, there were two churches before then, and the first one was built in 1844. So our church is 175 years old. It was on December 25th. And that was down on the river, on the Detroit River. I live on the Detroit River, so that's why I'm pointing to the Detroit River. And that was actually where the Underground Railroad was. And then they moved, there was a big fire, and lots of buildings down here were demolished, and they moved to not too far away from there on Washington Boulevard and State Street, I think it was. And there they was the second of the meeting houses. And then they moved to this way out, like 6 miles away, I guess. No, it wasn't even 6 miles. It was like maybe 3 miles. This church, the one that you were in, is about 3 miles from downtown Detroit. And that what you went through was not actually in part of the actual church building that was part of the underground.
But you've got genuine artifacts and memories of the experience that come from that original church where the real Underground Railroad was. I just wonder if you could speak about one or two of the things that are there and the stories that you tell.
Well, there was one instance, and it was, let's see, um, down in downtown Detroit. And when you went through it, you went to the part where you came to the church part, Finney's Barn. You remember that? Finney's Barn, where they had the horses and things like that. That was kind of interesting, because what would happen is that if the shoes, I think there would be people staying, the enslavers would be staying at Finney's Hotel, and the enslaved people were hiding out in Finney's Barn, and that was sort of interesting. Another thing, there was a Miss, let's see, what do I see her name? Here. I don't see her name, but she would talk about that all the time. And some of her writing is even in the church. We still have her writing. Let's see, what does it say? I'll read this part for you. It says, the Underground Railroad Living Museum Flight to Freedom Tour is a storytelling reenactment of the original Underground Railroad passage that operated between 1840 and 1863. Visitors will be shackled with wristbands at the entrance of the tour and begin their journey by entering through the door of no return on Goree Island in Africa. And I did that. I went there to that Goree Island and the door of no return. Let's see where. Oh, Frances Eddy was her name. The First Congregational Church has a rich history and remarkable story of the Underground Railroad. One of the most active members, Frances Eddy, described the beginning of the church's involvement with the Underground Railroad. As told by Frances Eddy, one of the most important stations in Detroit was headed by Seymour Finney, owner of Finney's Hotel at Woodward and Gratiot, with the hotel barn at State and Griswold. At first, there was a profound secrecy about the goings-on, but Seymour continued to do all he could, as he considered slavery contrary to justice and humanity. The basement of First Congregational Church at 4th and Wayne Street was used to hide refugees en route to boats at the foot of Wayne Street, known now as Washington Boulevard, smuggling them across to Windsor. Popular sentiment rallied to Finney's support. Many times when the hotel housed pursuing masters, Finney was lodging the slaves in his barn. It is said that grateful Black men sometimes assumed Finney's name after their arrival in Canada.
So that's the origin of the experience. The history is there.
Yes.
And when the enslaved people were trying to get fast, they were coming from the southern states, which were still slave-owning states, and seeking to get to the north and then to Canada. How near to freedom was Detroit?
Detroit was called Midnight, because you slept here in Detroit at midnight, and when you woke up the next day, you were free. You crossed over the river.
Just crossing the river.
Yes, and as I said, I live on the river, and right out there is the river. I live on the river.
And that was the river that led to freedom.
Yes. yes.
And they were coming out of the most dire circumstances. Was there a sense of helping people on to a promised land, to find something amazing and new?
Ask me that again, please.
Was there a sense that these people would have been Christians, they were brought up with a knowledge of the Bible? Was there a sense that it's not just physically becoming free, but actually reaching a kind of promised land, a chance to make a new life and to begin over again?
Yes, there was. Um, I'm tearing up. Look, you must understand what slavery is. Slavery, and I looked it up just before, a few minutes ago. Slavery is involuntary subjugation of one person to another, complete control of another, absolute control. You can do whatever you want to that person. Can you imagine what that must have felt like? To not own yourself, to have someone be able to beat you or shoot you or whip you. And yes, they did. And I want to, like I said, I live here on the river, and you can see, can you see Canada?
Yes.
Yes, that's Canada. That's over, there's the river there, and that's Canada. And right over there, I don't know that you can see it, but right down the way here, not very far, is the monument that was built with people getting ready to go across the river.
Your curtains are in the way at the moment because they're the blind.
Okay. All right. Well, then I will open up the curtain so you can see.
Yes.
Now, you can see now?
Yes.
You can see, and there is that Detroit River, and down there, there is a place, there's a book entitled, it's called The Fluid Frontier, and this was the Detroit River was a fluid frontier. It was a way for people to go from here in the United States across that little short span of that river to freedom. Can you imagine what that must have been like? Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And after having come from a place where it was just absolutely where people could do those kinds of things to you, and you had no control whatsoever. People could sell you, people could, and in that movie, about Harriet Tubman, they were actually getting ready to sell her.
Yeah.
And can you just imagine what that must have been like? It must have been just awful.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question you asked me?
Yeah, I don't know. You're doing much better than answering the questions.
Okay.
Fabulous. The question was, how close was Detroit to freedom? And that's the answer right there.
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. So you were there. The next year will be the 20th anniversary then of the experience.
Yes.
Yeah. And you were there when it was founded?
Yeah, I was the founder.
You were the founder of it?
Yes, and let me tell you how that happened.
Yes.
When I came there, there were like 18, 19 people, I think. And I would say that out of those people, I think 2 or 3 were African American. And then, of course, because I came, there were more African Americans started to come. And so as a result of that, I was confronted with how do I blend this congregation? What can I do to make them feel like they're one? And then I guess it was in 2001 or 2000 or whatever. Anyway, it was the 300th anniversary of Detroit, and they were giving out small grants for organizations within the city that would look into the history, look back over the history, and develop something that had to do with the history of Detroit. And I love museums. Every time I go someplace, I always go to museums. And I thought, well, here is an answer, because the Underground Railroad belongs to Black people, and the Underground Railroad belongs to white people, to African Americans and to European Americans. And so we wrote this grant, and it was for $6,000. And because I love museums, and we went down into the cellar, if you will, and decided that, okay, we're just going to do an Underground Railroad tour. We're going to have this. And that's how it got started. And it's so interesting because we took that $6,000 and outfitted some things. We rented some stuff. And then I thought, well, you know, after if you rent things like bushes and that sort of stuff, you have to give it back. And then I said, we can make this stuff ourselves. And so we did. So, of course, after that, in like 2004 or 5, we got a total of $1.5 million to do over a period of 3 years, I guess it was, to really outfit it and do all the things that we wanted to do down there. But we were out in the not parking lots, but empty lots, picking up branches and all that kind of stuff to bring them down there into our cellar, and getting burlap bags and all kinds of stuff. So I was its mother.
That's a great story. It's fantastic. So thank you very much. That's been fabulous, really.
Then a little later, I want to tell you this.
Yeah.
Then a little later, I wrote another grant, and that grant was for babes aboard the Underground Railroad. And that we have a program called BABES, which is Beginning Awareness Basic Education Studies. And it's a program with little puppets and so forth, and it teaches living skills. And this one little character, her name is Blendy, and she is a bloodhound, and she's a descendant from this plantation from which they escaped. And I was looking for that book. It's a whole set of books, and here they are. Here are those little characters. Can you see them?
Just hold it a bit higher. Oh, yes. Yeah.
And this one right here is Blendy. Right here is Blendy. That's a little bloodhound. And they escape on the Underground Railroad. It's a whole set of stories about babes aboard the Underground Railroad. And here is this first story. It's about self-image and feelings, knowing who you are and whose you are.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
Okay. Fabulous. I'm so grateful to you for doing this, and also for that tour you gave me.
Okay, and I'm sorry that I messed up your schedule.
Oh, not at all. No, it was okay.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. See you then.
Thank you.